Hello and welcome to our latest live edition of Geeking Out. My name is Adriana Vilela in Toronto, Canada, and I have an amazing panel of folks who are a range of Gen X and Millennials talking today about vibe coding. Are we excited?
Yeah.
Yes.
Woohoo!
Yay.
That's right. It's Monday. I'm sorry. Okay, I guess why don't we get started with intros? Tell me something a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Where do you work? What's your role? Where are you calling from? Also, for our audience who's tuning in live, thank you for tuning in live. And feel free to drop in the comments where you're tuning in from. All right, let's start with Cassidy.
Hello. Whoa, I didn't expect to be, I'm on this side of the screen. Anyway, hello, everybody. My name is Cassidy. I work on the developer advocacy team at GitHub. I am what the New York Times calls a peak millennial, born in 1991. And so I got to deal with, 2008 stuff and everything, college timing. But yeah, that's my very brief intro.
All right, next up, Jeff.
Hi, everybody. I'm firmly in the Gen X generation, born in 76. My goodness, that's a long time ago. But I am in Ohio, in the United States, and I work for Dynatrace as a developer advocate, like Adriana.
Woo woo! Yeah, we're on the same team. Woo. Tim.
Hi, Tim Banks. I am a solutions architect at Innovative Solutions. I am once again the oldest person in the room, born in 1975 as a mainline Gen Xer. Latchkey kid, Reagan era, all that kind of stuff. And I am calling in from Austin, Texas.
And Josh.
Hey folks, Josh Lee. I guess I'm a slightly elder millennial, 1987. I am an open source advocate at Altinity, and I'm calling in from Pittsfield, Massachusetts.
Awesome. Wow, for the first time, I'm not the oldest person in the room. Thank you, Tim. I was born in 1979, so I don't know. Am I a Xennial? Am I Gen X, late Gen Xer, early millennial?
Call you a cusp.
I'm on the cusp. Yeah. I'm told that I being born in 79 doesn't really count as the 70s, but I don't know. I wear flares all the time, so
yeah, but kids who were born in the 80s did that too. They do that. They're doing that now. Like nothing is new. Nothing is ever new.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Well, thank you everyone for joining, for your brief intros. Okay. I guess let's start with tell me about your experience writing code. How did you get into coding? Like, how old were you? First language? What was the language? How did you feel about it? All right, let's start. Let's do reverse order. Josh.
I started coding when I was about 12, and it was in AppleScript. I made a whole RPG using branching if statements, which
Wow.
Yeah, it was fun. AppleScript, and then eventually PHP once people actually started giving me money to do it.
Oh my God, PHP brings back memories. What was your computer like using AppleScript? What was your computer that you were?
I think there was one before this that I used, but the one that I vividly remember was the original bubble blue iMac.
Oh my God. Damn, do I feel old. All right, Tim, how about you?
Let's see. I first started programming when I was, I guess, 7 or 8. I guess the summer before I turned 8. It was Microsoft ROM Basic on a Commodore 64 with the 1541 disk drive.
Wow, fun.
That was I think that was I could have been, you were either like in the Microsoft camp or the IBM camp or the Tandy camp, right? So it was Commodore 64, it was Tandy, or it was regular IBM. We weren't rich, right? So it was Commodore 64. But Tandy was like specifically Radio Shack. I think they were the only ones. Like, so Radio Shack used to be a vendor of. That actually should be the true test of Millennium or Gen X. Is if you remember when you could buy electronic components from Radio Shack, and if you don't, you're not a Gen Xer.
Yeah. Like raw wires and stuff.
Yeah, baskets of resistors. You would just pull open and like pull them out, put a little bag. Yeah.
Damn. All right.
All right. I'm up next. So I was always a computer tinkerer, but I never really got into programming until college. And so it was a lot of Pascal and Perl and PHP was kind of my initial foray into all of this. But I always joke that the reason I have a degree in psychology, the reason I actually got into software development as a career was because I could spell HTML. And at the time, that's all those late 90s, man, if you could even understand how the web worked, people had jobs for you. So it was a good turn for me for sure.
That's awesome. How about you, Cassidy?
I started when I was 13. I was walking home from school in 8th grade and I heard someone say, check out my website. And I was like, you could have one of those. And so I went home on the family computer and started looking up how to make websites. YouTube was not around really. There weren't like tutorials everywhere. And so I was truly just reading the source code of websites and trying to copy it until I figured things out and just was doing stuff in Notepad. Eventually in high school, I picked up Java. I was doing all that in Notepad++. And I remember specifically in college when I took like my first computer science course and we were using Eclipse, I was like, autocomplete? Oh, how are people going to remember the syntax? Oh, this is so bad for their brains. Look at us now. But yeah, that is how I first started.
That is so cool. I started when I was 10 and my dad, we also had a family computer. And I think that's what dates you, right? It dates us is the era of the family computer. And my dad pulled me aside. He's a retired software architect. He's vibe coding for fun now. He learned Rust a few years ago.
Wow. And
he pulled me aside. He's like, how would you like to learn something cool? And BASIC was my first language. GW Basic, gorillas.bas. If anyone remembers the gorillas with the exploding bananas and the nibbles game, that was me. And then I swore off coding until like I dabbled a little bit here and there, but then I swore it off till like university where they made us take coding classes, and I'm like, oh, actually, like, don't hate this.
Like, oh no, this is fun.
Right. But it's funny you mentioned your Eclipse experience too, because the first time I used Eclipse, and mine was like after I'd finished university, and my dad is the one who got me into Eclipse. He's like, you should be using that. You should not be using Notepad. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't like this thing. But then I started using it. I'm like, magic.
Yeah. And now you're like, oh, that's so old. But at the time, it was magical. It knew what you were typing.
I know. IDEs, like what?
I used Vim until I switched to VS Code.
Wow.
I also did that. I was hardcore Vim until at a certain point I switched to Vim, and I was hardcore Vim until like end of 2018, early 2019.
Yeah, same. I think, and because you had so many some automations, macros, and keyboard shortcuts, like it was just so stinking good. You could have all your linting, you could have all like the color code. Yeah, it was just fantastic. And people like, so I see people doing it like in anything other than VI Vim, like it, like, there was some nano shade, some pico shade, obviously, as there should be, right? People who did it in Emacs, also cool. They were fine, but like, I would definitely, people who are losing like Visual Studio, I'd be like, stink eye.
You're like in your top shelf.
Absolutely. Just,
So what about Sublime?
Well, Sublime is really, that's essentially an Atom clone, right?
I think it predates Atom.
I was going to say, I think Atom was more of a clone of Sublime.
Okay, yeah. I had seen it. And again, this would have been like 2015, I think, is when I started seeing that. I was like, that's fine, but if you wanted to run in a GUI, like, I guess whatever, Yeah.
I went the other direction. I was using Vim motion commands in VS Code, and then I finally went fully into like a headless development environment with Vim around like 2018, and then Copilot and Cursor become a thing. I'm like, I have to go back to an IDE, and for like 6 months I did, and I hated it. And then Claude came around and gave me back my terminal as my IDE,
Yeah.
and everything was glorious ever since.
I do admit now that I'm using like GitHub Copilot CLI, which is like GitHub's version of that. Not to be a shill. Same, where I'm just like, I can kind of go back to Vim and Copilot and just live in the terminal a bit more. I'm a hacker again. It's nice
honestly,
feeling.
I don't actually code enough anymore to like retool. And I have thought about it because I do like, I started using VS Code because a lot of the GitHub integrations made it a lot simpler. It made it real easy to do dev containers and stuff like that, and that was all well and good. But I really want to live back in the terminal if I ever start to code again. But and this goes to the point, like why do I vibe code at all now? It's because I actually hate writing code, despise it. I mean, like it's the worst. It is the absolute worst. It is toil for me. I'm too much of an architect at this point. And the code feels like, it's like the actual typing of a paper when you have an idea.
I could see that.
Sure.
I could see that. So do you then I guess you despise, actually let me rephrase it. What do you despise most about coding, like hand coding?
But again, it's let me preface this by saying that I am, by my doctor's own description, obtusely ADHD, like profoundly ADHD. And so the time and executive function it takes to, like, I have this idea, I know how it would be coded. I can talk it out, I can map it up, blah, 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 but like actually have to sit down, like that part, just absolute, just it's droning.
You have to slow your thinking down to the speed that you can type.
Gosh, it is just awful.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you dictate ever with like voice typing?
When I do talks and stuff like that or anything like that, I dictate all the time, or I'll record. What I'm notorious for doing is recording a voice memo, and then like having that turned into like a blog or something like that.
Oh, nice. My only issue with that is that it doesn't. I find like Suri does not know how to like translate my Canadian accent sometimes.
No, use Textract, not Textract. Use Transcribe.
What's it called? Amazon
Transcribe.
Oh, Transcribe. Okay.
Yeah.
On computer, there's an app called Handy, just handy.computer. It's open source. Ooh. It's great. My team uses it for everything.
Yeah. But transcribing the thought to actualization pipeline, right, has always been like the drone, just the toil, the absolute dreariness of it all, right?
So you're more of an you're like an architect mindset more than anything. And so a question for the other folks on this panel what's your sort of coder persona? Are you an architect mindset like Tim?
I think for me, I probably would never put myself in the architect mindset, right? The puppet master. I just want to make the things happen kind of guy. I would have said that most of my career, right? I got intimately familiar with some syntax and whatever my language of the year was, and I would kind of go that route. But I will tell you that in the last, it's been almost a year now that Claude Code's been out. In the last year, I found out I don't care about that actually at all. And I don't want to have to front load all of the syntax and all of the structures inside whatever that language is. I actually don't care about that at all. What I care about is the outcome. I want it to do the thing. I know what the thing is. So I think vibe coding for me, if that's what we still call it, is has made me realize I'm much more like Tim than I would have admitted to myself.
Interesting. How about you, Cassidy?
It looks like Gabor in the chat agrees with you too. He said that it turns out I don't care about hand coding things. I care about the result of that. And I'm like, I go back and forth because I think that's the ultimate senior dev answer. It depends, because on some of my projects, I just want it to exist and go. Like there's been a few apps that I've made where I'm just like, it's finally done. I've had this in my list of side projects for forever. And then other projects, like one of my longer running side projects, I just cut my first release this past week since 2022. I've been putting off so many features because it's so tedious to code the individual features, but at the same time, I care how they're built. And so I think that's where the line blurs between like agentic engineering and vibe coding and stuff, where like I still care about how the code looks, how it works, how it integrates with the rest. But at the same time, I love that I don't have to write it sometimes.
What I think is interesting is, so I used to just maintain nothing but like entire repos of nothing but functions that are commented. This function does this function does that. And I used to use Elasticsearch to help me find the function, copy and paste, and done, right? Which I guess essentially is what Copilot does at this point. But you know, that because I want to process text, I want to change this variable and done. Like that was it. I just wanted to get through it. So I would like write once, use everywhere, like, you know, what Java was supposed to do. But I would do that in Python specifically. Like I wanted to do it in Perl, but Perl is definitely not write once, use anywhere. But Python was modular enough that you could take those things and put functions together, stuff like that. And that's how I largely view how I, you know, vibe code or whatever now. Is like, you know, I want a function that's this, I want to do this, I want to do this, this, and this, and this. I know it's supposed to look like, I know it's supposed to do. So whenever it gives me output, I'm like, not like that. I want this, you know, but it gives me a scaffold to work from that I can just, okay, now I can modify these things as I need.
Yes.
Yes.
For me, the vibe, like I agree. There's this code that I care about and the code that I don't care about, right? And for me, the vibe coding is actually making it easier to also write the code that I do care about. I had certain beliefs that I held as a developer. One of them was this dryness, and I think I did that almost to the point of insanity, right? Like trying to abstract abstractions on abstractions, and
like over architect, right?
Yeah. So I think that was like a sickness that I had. And then another one was just like my hesitation to like just try something out and like write a reference implementation or like a proof of concept, and then once I had that working, my willingness to like refactor that and actually make it into the thing that I wanted. And now that I don't have to do the typing for any of those things, I find it's much easier to get to that solution that I have in my head, even if it's the more perfect, refined one that I'm curating and not just sort of letting the AI give me a dashboard and that's how I should see that it's correct.
Now, how do you like? How do you feel, and this goes to everyone, how do you feel about like giving, like not knowing a language deeply or not knowing a language at all and being okay with the AI writing you stuff? Like my first little vibe coding experiment, it recommended, like GitHub Copilot recommended using like JavaScript. I know nothing about JavaScript. I tried. I really tried. We just don't get along. And because I wanted to do in Python for the back end and JavaScript from the front end. And it's like, oh, you should probably use JavaScript for both. It'll be better. I'm like, okay. But then it generated a bunch of stuff. I'm like, I've never heard of this framework. I don't know what this code is. I can't vet it versus like Java. I haven't touched Java for a long time. But like when it vibe codes some stuff for me in Java, I needed to tinker with Java a little bit for a demo for a talk that I was giving. I was like, I don't recognize most of the syntax, but I'm familiar with it and I can call out the bullshit when it's doing something wrong. How do you like, do you care? Like feelings, thoughts?
I still internally debate on this.
So I built myself a process for this. One of the things that I have never spent any time on, I've built a lot of mobile apps, but nothing for iOS, even though that's the phone that I use primarily. And I know nothing about Swift. Certainly, I know nothing about Objective-C. So regardless of what path I'm going to go down, I don't really know what to do. And this is one of the tools that I found works really well for me, is that I just keep layering AI on top of more AI. So I have an agent that I'm talking to that's like, hey, I want to build this feature, and we talk it out, we build a plan, build a GitHub issue, and then we execute from there. But then I will often bring in a different agent. I'll bring in ChatGPT or somebody else, and I'll say, hey, did we do this right? What do you think about this architecture? Where are the issues that I think might be a problem? And then we talk about that. And I find that even if I don't have any knowledge of the platform, it's going to start talking to me in architectural terms that I do know. And then we can say, oh, no, I don't want to do it that way. Let's solve this in a way that we aren't storing the data in 3 places, for example.
Right.
I think that's where I'm leaning, where I would rather use technologies I know because I know what can go wrong. Where I'm just like, okay, you don't want to build it this way. I know why. And there's also something that will probably happen less and less over time is when something goes wrong and I'm just like, oh, this is the bug, you need to fix it this way, and it takes too long, I'll just stop the agent and build it myself because I know what to fix. And that's something that I can't necessarily do in Golang because I don't know Golang. But if you give me some web page, some React thing, I just know what to do. I can fix it and move on with my life. And so I think that's the benefit of knowing things. But at the same time, there's libraries I want to try in, I said Golang, in Rust, and in anything where I'm like, it would be cool to try that. And to make something for iOS or something. This is what AI is for. And maybe that's where it should be more of a learning tool rather than a building tool. But the tools definitely aren't optimized for learning right now.
And I think that's a good point, is that, we are all here as seasoned practitioners. I don't know how we use this to help us augment our understanding, to help us find patterns that we know exist in things we're familiar with and duplicate those in syntaxes we're not familiar with, right? So essentially when we vibe code, we already know what it's supposed to look like. We already know vaguely what it should do. We may not know the particulars of the syntax, and that's fine. But I know the patterns of we could, what they call it, leak code or pseudocode, whatever, right? We can figure that out. I think there's a distinct difference between that as a seasoned practitioner, someone who knows nothing, or who's very junior, who's trying to hey, let me vibe code this thing, and oh, it works, so it must be good, right? And I think there's a clear I feel like delineation between that, because that port I would consider vibe coding, right? Is I don't really know what it is I want, I don't know how it works, but I just need something to build something that does the thing that I ask it to do, versus I have a clear understanding of how something should function, how it should work, blah, blah, blah. And I just need something to reduce the toil of actually putting the hands on keyboards so I can get to the point, so I can write, like you said, the code that matters, the code that I want to write, but also make, the thing work as it should.
So what do we call that second thing where
that's a
good
question.
Typing with AI? Yeah.
I hear people talk about the definitions of these things all the time, but I feel like what all of us are describing is not vibe coding. Assisted engineering, whatever term you want to use for it. But I think vibe coding is the word for, I have no idea what I'm doing, and we're just going to wing it, see what happens.
Right.
It's the difference between a DJ and a conductor.
Yeah. Can I rant about the industry for a second?
Yes, always. Evergreen.
I think right now everybody's being very short-sighted, because there's all these mass layoffs and everybody's trying to hire senior developers who can augment their skills with AI and go forth. But I think the best way to become a more senior developer, like the difference between a good senior dev and a great one, is mentorship. And we are losing that aspect of mentorship by not hiring junior developers and not having the patience to mentor, because with AI, it just gives us the answers. It gives answers to junior developers, it gives answers to senior developers, and you move on with your lives. And I feel like that is a very important thing we need to try to fight against right now. We need to be able to build up these more junior developers. We need to hire them and have them do things, because I'm seeing posts now where people are just like, oh, we ended up hiring a junior developer to save on token costs. We're going back around the loop, which is wild to me, but that's a thing that's happening. Yeah. And the lack of friction in learning is going to be a disservice to everybody eventually. And that's why I think we need to mentor more, hire more junior developers, and use these tools more for learning rather than for doing stuff for us.
I think that's a great point. And I just put up a link on here to an article that I had bookmarked from TLDR AI, where it says Shopify is actually hiring juniors. And I think that's such an excellent point, because if we run out of juniors, we don't have any juniors to cultivate, then what?
What happens when we retire?
Retire, whatever. And then
we'll just have bad software.
I wanted to say yes and to what you were saying. I think I'm a big believer that if you think you know anything, try to teach it to someone that doesn't know it. and you'll find out
Yes.
really quickly how well you know something. And that's what junior developers, I mean, in addition to being able to get a lot of the low level stuff done, they help senior developers really refine their skills and understand how to explain and how to make sure that things are working. But I'll take that even a step further. As I look at the industry and I look at all these companies saying, oh, we had 8,000 developers, now we have 3,000. And they're all using AI, and we're just as productive as we ever were. That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, the world has an infinite desire for software. There will never be enough software to appease all the needs that software could fulfill. And so if you had 8,000 developers and you gave all of them AI, you would have had 24,000 developers, and you could have shipped features faster, and you could have delivered more value to your customers faster. And instead you said, no, we're going to save costs so we can move at the same speed. And that seems so backwards to me. And I think the companies that don't jump on that bandwagon are the ones that are going to emerge more successful in the long run.
Nobody's working less.
No,
That's it.
Everybody's working more.
Yeah.
If I can,
Make it make sense.
the main issue that we have with that, and it's the thing that causes the problem you're talking about, Cassidy, right? And the point that Jeff made for us that for a long time, our industry has overemphasized velocity over everything, right? It is the speed at which you ship code that they're looking at, not how good the code is, not how, it's how many features can we, how we can sell, what's our velocity. And that is the organizational North Star. So as long as that organizational North Star is anything that does not directly map, and I'm talking at one level, not 2 or 3 levels, to velocity, is just sidecast. That includes hiring juniors because they don't want to take time to mentor them or develop them. That also means like, oh, if I hire juniors, that means I got to take time away from a senior developer who could otherwise be, getting our velocity.
Shipping. Yeah.
And so the shipping thing is so short-sighted. It is the same thing we complain about with sales folks who are so short-sighted about a thing like, oh, you're just only looking about this one quarter. Engineering leadership is only looking at this as what is velocity. They are playing the worst game of checkers that we've ever seen. And the companies that play chess are the ones that are going to thrive, in years, not quarters.
absolutely. How about you, Josh? Thoughts?
Oh, well, when we were talking about mentorship, actually, even going back before that, right, we were talking about how we all use AI. And one of the things that I found is it's less about how the tool gets used and more about when to use the tool, which I love because I'm this type of person who likes to know about all the tools and when you use them. But that's one of those things that only comes with experience. But that's something that gives me hope, right? Because now as a mentor, it's so much more like I can just say, like, here's the 3 things you need to go talk to your chatbot about. And that's enough of a stepping stone for someone that I'm mentoring, that they can go figure out the how. I just had to give them the when in exactly the right moment. So I find that really cool. But yeah,
I feel like we need to be willing to fail more in general too. There's a lot of fear around it where it's just like, well, I could just have the bot do it and then I'll get the correct answer or something, rather than you learn so much more by failing than by succeeding. And we're trying to avoid the failures less, but as a result, I think we're failing more in the long run.
I feel like we're getting stupider from like we're getting dumber from that because we're outsourcing thinking to outside of our brains, right?
Exactly.
I would say what we categorize as failure has changed, right? Because failure now is like, we did not ship enough things this quarter. We didn't, the line on the bar did not hit the thing that someone said we had to hit, right? Versus, an outage that lasts 8 hours, like, oh, whatever, it's cost of doing business, it's fine, because we just gloss over outages nowadays. We just accept that as the price of like, oh yeah, it's going to happen. Like, AWS went down, I'm not going to poke at anybody on the call or their companies, but a certain company around is no longer in the 9s. It could be anybody. It could be anybody. I don't know who, but things like that. And we're just, and it's just like, oh, and we do laugh at it because it's like, oh man, this is bad. But nothing is going to change. Right. And so like we are accepting that level of what I would call like production lies, like a product failure, as a cost of doing business. So we don't so we hit revenue goals, so we hit shipping feature goals and stuff like that. And I feel like that's not going to go well for us in the long run.
You know, I was while we're on this topic, it reminded me of
I'm so sorry, Cassidy. I apologize.
I have no comment.
I just wanted to briefly mention one thing that I encountered on YouTube the other day. I was like watching a video on whatever, and it gave me some AI ad, and it was like a product manager, a product owner was like, you know, there's this feature that I've been trying to get the developers to write, and it was just like, it was a quick feature, so I decided to like just use AI to create it for me. So then basically bypassing like the developers and this product manager, product owner, whatever wrote it. And that was the premise of the ad, is like, oh, AI is so magical that even your product owner can write a feature. And it's like, is this like thoughts about that? I have some, my issue with this is like, I'm like, are we trivializing this is an easy feature to implement? Like,
I'm certain I'm not the only person who's worked at a company where an executive started implementing code and the engineers were like, stop it. We're letting that happen more now with AI, and I don't like that.
You know, I think there's a place for that, though, right? If a product owner is trying to give you something to give the engineering team more context to how something should look or behave or whatever, that's great. If they're like, hey, this is the user story that I got, I just illustrated that, this is blah, 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 this is kind of what we're going for, perfect, right? That is fine to do. That's not a feature. That should not make it into production. That should be an artifact that you take into consideration as part of the software development lifecycle, like an architecture diagram, a mock-up. Like we do mock-ups. It's just a mock-up, right? Perfect. That's great. An interactive mock-up. I love it.
Sure.
Instead of having to do it in Figma, you do it in React or whatever. Great. That's not a feature and should not be treated as a feature. And anyone that says that is a feature, hire me a CTO, please. I will take your money.
I think anytime you have executives or PMs, and both of them have fantastic roles in the software lifecycle, but if either of them are asking for GitHub credentials, that seems like that's a concern to me. You don't need to be committing anything to this.
I actually worked for a company where we gave the CEO shadow credentials to a repository. That was just,
nice.
It was just it was a private fork of the actual real one. So they just.
Yeah, I think there's always exceptions to that rule too, but for the most part, that seems like that should be a warning sign.
Yeah. For sure.
For those people, like, there are things you can do if you have the urge to vibe code. You can make yourself a little dashboard. You can build a tool that pulls stats from GitHub that you need, right? It doesn't have to go into the project. There's still useful outlets for these things.
We actually have a channel in Slack that's just called Awesome Slop, where it's people doing exactly that, where they're just like, I needed a thing. I know it's not going in the product, but look what I made for myself. And it's nice seeing that. They have an outlet. You can see cool projects, and yeah.
Our company,
and I think that's a nice thing.
Yeah.
At every we have a weekly all hands, and every all hands you have someone who goes like, hey, we have a section called AI in the wild. Like, show me the thing that you made, whether it was for work or whether it was for, like, you know, somebody made like a scoring system for their kids' little league and stuff like that. I was like, that's great. Those are great things to see because it gives people ideas. These are use cases that people have. I love that. I love seeing people's creativity, right? Brought to life.
I love seeing Parquet used for Little League.
Sorry?
I love seeing things like Parquet used for Little League.
I'm more of a CSV person.
Jason
Objects are better. Jason Objects are so much better for Little League. Time series, man. You can't use.
I do think, like, I remember a few people chatting with a few people, and I think there was even a comment earlier that I have to sift through, but to find it. But I think it's all about, like, we all have these ideas of cool projects that we have in our brains, but then, like, just take too damn long to write, right? Like, I was chatting with my husband, and he's had this database idea, like this program of like a distributed database that he's had in his brain for I don't know, like years and years. And he's like, and now with like Claude Code, I can finally bring it to life. And he's got like an AI agent working on it on the side as he's like doing other things. And it's like, it's creating the thing that I've had in my brain for all this time.
Is Ian watching right now?
He's not watching right now.
Promise. Whenever you watch this, man, we do not need any more distributed database. I promise you. It's so good. We are so good.
No, Adriana, I'm with you though. I would say this year I've purchased a dozen domain names that all have things in production.
Yeah, that's the thing. My domains are getting used. That's crazy.
Right. I'm going through the backlog. I'm like, oh, I can still do that idea. That's cool.
It's wild.
Amazing.
So this is what it really is enabling. This all of us DevRels and Smarty Pants fell off of buying domains, and the domain registrars are like, this will not stand. That's who's really funding the
that's
AI
the
wave.
Conspiracy here.
That's what it actually is. That's conspiracy that we will foster for sure.
AI was only created to sell more domain names.
Big domain has its hand in everything.
It was all GoDaddy.
Yeah.
There was a blog post. I tried to link it in the chat, but I don't think I can share links. There's a blog post by William Perron called "Be a Carpenter" that he posted recently that I thought was very good, where it was when you go into a carpenter's workshop, they always have a bunch of weird shaped homemade custom tools, because at one point they needed to make some kind of weird cut at a specific angle and things needed to be just this way, that way. And I thought it was a very good take, basically saying like a lot of developers now are becoming carpenters in that way, where we're building these tools that sometimes it's just vibe coded slop, sometimes it's just being creative, but it does one small thing that we want it to do, whether it's using a domain name or actually executing on something that we wanted to get to the next step in a project.
Now, I think that's great, but then what happens to like the non-developers who are like, and now I can bring this idea to life and unleash it to the public to use? Because there's I think there's a difference between, like, hey, I have a cool startup idea and I need a developer to like create a POC so that I can, pitch it to some investors or whatever. And now I think as like an entrepreneur, you have the ability with vibe coding to like create that POC without finding a developer first, but like, please find developers afterwards to like bring this idea to fruition. Like, I think it can be a little bit scary, right? Because you can unleash shit code into the world that people actually use.
I love that analogy of a carpenter, and I'll tell you why. Because I've long held that like the power of real expertise is always cross domain, right? It's never in a single like deep but very narrow thing, right? So carpenters used to have to. One of the things they used to do was they had to take trees and turn them into 2x4s, right? They had to take like logs and turn them into, whether it was sheathing, whether it was plank or something. So full disclosure, I used to be a general contractor, right? But like, so now that they don't have to do that anymore, primarily, right? They can go to the store, they can get 2x4, they can get plywood sheathing, they can get decking, they can get all the pre-wood done, right? So does that mean that anybody can build a house just like because that's something already done? Absolutely not, right? The true expertise in carpentry is how you join these things together. Like, how many nails do you have to put into this thing to be able to bear this much wood? How do these things function together? And even if you have a rough idea of how far that is, you still have to know how to do a joint. You still have to know how to build a rafter. You still have to know, like, all these things that have to do. It's not just how do you make the wood, right? It's how do you put the wood together to make something stable and livable. And so that's what I love. That is a fantastic analogy, even beyond like the weird kind of tools. You have those weird tools in there because you know that sometimes you got to make this joint the right way. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Yeah. And I think, we talked about availability and capacity and stuff earlier. Everybody saying, I'm just going to make this now because I can, is the reason why we're having all of these availability issues. It's astronomical because everybody does think that they can build, and maybe it'll level out. Maybe. Once again, this is where I think learning and education is very desperately needed right now. But I like what you said, Tim. Too many people are trying to build houses when they should probably just build like a nice backyard shed or a trellis.
That's it.
But I think we just need enough time to pass for that all to happen, right? There's a lot of people that are vibe coding their way into what they think is the next big startup.
Yeah.
The moment they get 100 users, they're going to realize they don't, like, it's not going to scale. They can't do the things that they thought they were going to be able to do. And now they've got to call in the pros to figure out how to make it work because their customers are paying them for the service.
So you think cause and effect will just sort of, like sort everything out, that they'll just like, they'll hit a wall and that'll be.
You think that, but remember how many times people said, "Oh, DevOps, we can shift left," which means they just had their developers doing operations, right? And then their operations would get real big, and they'd fall over, and then the company would die. They would never actually like, "Hey, we need to hire some more operational folks." Like, if that was a thing they never had thought had any value before, once they fall over because they have customers, that's usually where they stop.
Oh my God, look at this comment. LinkedIn vibe code cleanup specialist.
Bro,
That's an actual thing now. There's people with whole
Really? No, come on.
People have consultancy firms just for cleaning up vibe coding now.
Holy cow.
Remember, okay, here's something that you may not remember as a millennial, but I remember very well as a Gen Xer, and we will see again soon, right? When I came in the industry, right, it was pre-Y2K, and there were these COBOL programmers who used to work in the 60s who were literally like printing money. I'm talking these folks were getting $200,000 and $300,000 a year in the late 90s to come back and fix and patch COBOL and Fortran on push cards and like that. And eventually that's where when we retire, I'm going to come back as a consultant, and you're going to like my signing bonus is going to be a Porsche 911 Turbo, right? For me to come in and fix what you vibe coded. I love this plan. Like
I love that your bonus was also a Gen X reference. I think a lot of people are like, Porsche 911, that's the car I want?
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah. No, that's timeless, absolutely timeless. There's some Gen Zers that once you drive one, that's it. That's it. But it is also very 80s.
Yeah.
Now, here's a question. As Gen Xers or millennials vibe coding, do you think that Gen Zs or even Gen Alphas are better positioned in this vibe coding world because they're coming up more AI native? And
No.
And why not?
See my earlier rant. I think that like the lack of friction in their learning is doing a disservice to their brains.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And I've given some like lectures at schools and stuff, and the main thing I drive home is like, try to do this without AI. Just see if you can. And the students panic. And my cousin, who's a teacher, was saying that, and she teaches English, not AI stuff at all. And she was saying that to her high school seniors, she'll say like, okay, just tell me what you think about this chapter. And the students won't want to answer. And they'll be just like, can't I just Google this? Can't I just ChatGPT this? Like, I'm going to get it wrong. I might as well get the correct answer. And that's where that like fear of failure comes back into play, where they would rather just get the answer that's correct, but then they don't understand the value of failing to get to a better thinking position. And yeah, I am worried for.
I was thinking about how to explain this to my daughter a couple of days ago. We just had this conversation. She goes, I don't understand why just using AI to solve the problem is bad. Like, why do I need all this foundational knowledge? And I said, okay, I want you to imagine for a minute that if I hand you a dish, just like a kitchen plate, right? And you don't have any way to evaluate whether or not it's clean or not, what would you do? She's like, well, I don't know. I'd have to probably figure out what does clean mean, right? For a plate. And I said, but you would maybe also just say, oh, I'm just going to run it through the dishwasher. Then it will be clean. And it's like, well, but you still don't know after it comes out of the dishwasher if it's actually clean. You just know that the box says that's what's supposed to happen. And we kind of worked through this. And she goes, oh, so I actually need to understand like what cleaning means, how to operate the dishwasher in a way that will make sure that the product that comes out of it at the end is actually something that I would want to use again. And I felt like that clicked a little bit. I don't know if that analogy is landing here or not, but
that does make sense.
It felt to me like if you don't have any ability to evaluate the outcome, then getting whatever input you give it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I think to your point, like a complaint I've had, and folks who have followed me for a while have heard me say on the soapbox before, is that we have been doing ourselves a disservice by abstracting away complexity over and over again with more and more layers of abstraction until finally we don't understand what's going on beneath it, right? Again, I'll go back to carpentry or construction. It's like, you can, if you need a new roof, sometimes the people will just, I'm going to put an old roof, a new roof on shingles on top of the old roof, right? It's called a roof over, right? You're only allowed to do that once. You got to pull everything off and redo it because you don't understand what's going on actually underneath there, right? So if the wood is rotten underneath there, you can put on as many layers of shingles as you want to. Eventually, your roof's going to collapse, right? If you don't understand what's going on underneath there, layers of abstraction are not going to fix the complication. We, as an industry, decided we do not want to decomplicate things. We just want to continue abstracting them. And AI is the latest case of it. Again, as people rely on AI and do not understand the complexity of the underlying layers, when there becomes a fault in those underlying layers, they are not going to know how to fix them.
I have a story. A friend of mine, she works in finance and knows nothing about tech, but she's a neighbor of mine. We hang out a lot, and she started just asking me questions about like what vibe coding is and stuff. She got her hand on an agent and she started building. And she was very excited about building this website for her art. She's a painter, does a bunch of cool things. And she started talking about all the features she was implementing without showing me anything. And she said, I'm adding a community feature where people can talk to each other. And then if they want to commission art from me, they can upload pictures for inspiration. And also they'll be able to do like payments on the website. And just red flags were popping up in my head constantly where I was like, you're openly letting random internet people upload pictures. You're collecting payments. There's so many things. You're letting people talk to each other. Things that with experience, you don't do that. You have so many guardrails in place. She just didn't know. And then eventually she gave me her website and was just like, roast it. Tell me what you think. It was beautiful. It was lipstick on a pig though, where I said, cool. So I'm not a hacker. But I inspected Element here and I could see your password is admin123. And then the more I looked into it, the more I was like, okay, I can see every PayPal transaction that would ever go through your website. Anybody can access these different pages. You didn't actually protect them behind proper authentication. Just so many different things because she didn't know the fundamentals. But at the same time, she was saying, hey, the bun runtime isn't working. And I was thinking about switching it to Node. And I was like, you're so advanced that you're talking about that. And yet so behind because you don't even know what an array is. Like it was such a weird thing and something that I feel like we'll see a lot more as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
thinking. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Is that just a new generation of skill? Not for like the non-technical person who's like taking payments online and shouldn't be, right? But for the juniors who are coming into tech, is that just a new set of skills? Like I don't know how a compiler works. Maybe I should. Maybe I should have learned that at some point in my career, but I never did. And yet I have, right, like I exist in this layer of abstraction where we sort of developed all these best practices, test-driven design, unit tests, all these different things that we do to make the code reliable to the extent that it actually is within the layer of abstraction that sort of I've lived my career in. So is that just a new set of skills that we don't have that these Gen Z kids, right? Like I share your concerns because like certainly when I'm actually what we've defined as vibe coding and not looking at the results, I'm not learning anything about the tools and how they work. But maybe there's these new skills to sort of wrangle all these things that you don't understand.
It's a very interesting way to look at it. I've got kids and I have, dealt with them, like dealing with how they create stuff, how they use AI and things like that. Right. And again, this is not, I am not everyone. So take that with a grain of salt, but like, there is still like, when it does this stuff, I still understand what it does underneath that. Right. So I am able to add the skills that I can, prompt engineering. I know how to do that. Why? Because I've, given instructions to people before. Right. Like I know how, you're communicating with something else that's going to do something for you. Right. So like it is not, it's a skill that if, like I said, if you already have the underlying foundations, if you already understand the fundamentals of something, it is easy for you to adopt the new patterns, right? I talk about this in the context of jiu-jitsu over and over again. Like as a white belt, you learn these basic moves, right? Once you understand the fundamentals behind the moves, all the rest of the moves that you learn become easy. Like you understand why they work, right? I think the compiler is a great example, right? Because it used to be you used to know how the compiler worked, right? Because you had to fix the compiler half the time. And now that has become so well maintained by other people typically that you don't have to worry about the compiler. But what happens when the maintainers of the compilers retire?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that with some projects right now, right? Projects that we relied on for now. Now the person's like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. And like, this is a critical thing that nobody knows how to work on.
Yeah.
It's kind of like seeing how like there's a shortage of cobblers, people who know how to construct shoes and stuff properly, because they're just kind of aging out and people aren't training them up to do that because machines do that and stuff. I wonder what that will look like in the tech industry and what the new baseline will be of like machines will just handle that kind of understanding.
I think it goes back to like Tim's comment on abstraction, right? Like we've abstracted things that, you know, like now we're forgetting fundamentals, but like abstractions aren't necessarily bad. Like for me as a personal example, when I was learning, after I learned BASIC, my second language was C. And that was my first time dealing with like memory allocation and like nightmare. And I didn't fully understand that until a couple of years later in university. I chose to take a class on intro to microprocessors, and they taught assembler. And I'm like, will I ever use assembly language? No. But did it give me an appreciation for how like memory allocation works? Absolutely. And that was so good to have. Like, you know, we're not saying like, you know, you have to learn how to calculate a square root manually, but like understand how this shit works, at least at some fundamental level, so that you kind of know what's going on under the covers. And I think that's the balance we need to try to achieve.
It's a great thing, because I often hear that as I go, well, we don't write assembly anymore. I'm like, yeah, actually people do write assembly all the time. How do you know the computer you're working on? You know that those CPUs like that. You know what I'm saying? Like people, just because you don't use assembly does not mean that it is not used or is never that doesn't exist anymore. And that's kind of like the point. I just become so like, I'm not frustrated, but like disappointed. Like Cassie, the cobbler is great. Cassie got all these great examples. The cobbler is a great example because the reason, one of the reasons that cobblers are dying out is because people buy shitty shoes now that aren't worth repairing, right? So, and because why? Because that's what they would do. You can make them easy, you can make them cheap and stuff like that. But like quality shoes, if you get a good pair of shoes that are high quality that you can pass on, you will go and find a cobbler that does that. But people don't do that anymore. It's like why does a refrigerator now like only last like 3 to 5 years versus the refrigerator your parents had that lasted like 50? You know, so I wonder if the move towards obsolescence in tech has gotten to the point where now, you know, it doesn't matter how bad the code is. We're just going to replace it for years. And I've written stuff I've written that I was, that was in production. I'm lucky if that lasted 5 years, right? Because we change everything, right? Sure. We don't write anything durable anymore, right? So this may just be the latest iteration of that. I just feel like we're balancing on this on a very unstable foundation if no one knows how to fix it.
Could AI output be the new compiler output?
Maybe.
Like, there's a lot of people.
I want to hear more. I want to hear more. I want to hear more. Say more. Say more.
Because like you said, nobody's writing assembly anymore, but also yes, because it's just compiling ultimately into that. Is the AI output, like the prompting and everything, is just another layer that compiles down, and we think of it that way, where it's just that layer more, where there's still fundamentals to know, but you're just further away from it?
That's a question I've seen posed a lot, is why is the AI writing React for me? Like the output is ultimately something I guess I don't care about, or some people don't care about, right? So why is it writing it in a language that's abstracted 3 ways already?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So does the AI need its own language or its own like
that's
entirely new?
I said that to somebody last September, and they got so violently angry with me about it. I remember this discussion as well. They were like, were pissed, right, at the notion that, you know, that you could. I was like, AIs. If computers are talking to computers, I don't need to be able to read it.
Yeah. It's like, you know, the story. I don't know where I heard it, where like there's like two message bots chatting with each other, and they ended up making up their own language because it was just faster to
More efficient. Yeah.
converse, because they don't need to talk, like we don't need to understand. They're speaking amongst themselves.
But I'm okay with using an e-commerce site where no human has ever read the code, maybe. But I'm terrified to get on an airplane where no human has ever read the code.
Mm.
Yeah. Autonomous airplanes are being developed. It's interesting. I listened to a podcast where they were making an argument for autonomous vehicles, and the main argument is like humans are terrible drivers. Like we have so many distractions, and I think if you're ADHD thrown into the mix, like I think that's one of the things that scared me the most about learning how to drive. I'm like, my brain, there's like 50 bajillion things happening at the same time, and you're expecting me to pay attention to the road. So I understand. I think it makes sense in theory to have self-driving cars, but like I think we have to, then everything has to be autonomous vehicles.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, not to be controversial, but it's like gun control doesn't work if you only take them away from one person. You know what I'm saying? Like either it's got to be all or nothing. Like if you have all autonomous drivers, it's fine. All the computers can negotiate one with another, right? But if you've got even like a small but significant portion of people that are not driving, raw dog in it, like you're not fixing anything.
Someone pointed out in chat, and I think it's a good point, that AIs would just use English if they were talking to each other because it's what they're trained on. And I found this too, right? Like I've tried to use AIs with languages that I'm more partial to, and then it's like, for the thing I'm doing, it's trained on Python. I should just let it use Python.
Right. Interesting.
Okay, but then let me counter with this. Is like, would that be because that the people who are writing these languages were kind of biased towards English, and now if anybody can do anything with AI, why would future languages rely on English?
Right, but it'll take several generations for that to make its way into new AI models.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think if we're saying like it should just be in English, we're saying we're making it, and I would be like, and I will say very bluntly that English is a terrible language. It's dumb. The rules don't make sense, right? And white supremacy is the main reason why we put it in our code, right? If we were to use language that is very deterministic, right, it would not be English.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Because I think only I know at least 3 of us here are not English as a first language. Right. And I know what learning English is like. What do you mean there's 4 ways to spell read?
Right.
Or you can type read and it means 2 different things. Like what? Like, so.
I am very glad I learned English at an early age, because if I were to try to sort it out later in life, I'd be like, what the fuck?
We're teaching my kids English, Spanish, and Korean at the same time, and the rules are made up. They just don't matter in so many different languages and stuff. But it is wild to see how like some things click easier than others to a baby. And this is a whole tangent that could be a whole other stream, how like humans learn languages, and it would be interesting to see if bots could learn similarly.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Well, I know we are coming up on time, so I want to be respectful of everyone's times, because I know everyone's got busy schedules. But before we wrap up, I did want to just go around and ask everyone for their thoughts on what do you think the most important skill that a software engineer needs to have in this new AI coding assisted age. Let's start with Josh.
Trust but verify.
Ooh, love that. Tim.
Curiosity.
All right. Jeff.
Tim stole mine, but I will go with something else. I think for me, it's communication. The advent of AI is showing everybody just how poor they are at communication. You ask for something and you get something wildly different than you expected.
That is so true. So true. And Cassidy?
Mine's a combo of these where it's willingness to teach and learn from other humans.
Love it.
Love that. That's great.
Amazing. Well, thank you. This was such a great discussion. I swear I could just keep going on and on and on. Thank you, everyone, and peace out and geek out. Geeking Out is hosted and produced by me, Adriana Vilela. I also compose and perform the theme music on my trusty clarinet. Geeking Out is also produced by my daughter, Hannah Maxwell, who incidentally designed all of the cool graphics. Be sure to follow us on all the socials by going to bio.site/geekingout.